We've turned the tables on you a little bit, and I think you'll see why. So what I'd like to do is have you just close your eyes for just a moment and feel the words, as well as hear the words of this beautiful poem by T.S. Eliot. And it's one of my very favorite poems, and it's also one of my very favorite teachings. At the still point of the turning world, at the still point of the turning world, neither flesh nor fleshless, neither from nor toward, at the still point, there the dance is. But neither rest nor movement, and do not call it fixity where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor toward, neither ascent nor decline, except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. Except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance, and there is only the dance. So what I'd like to do is unpack that poem a little bit and then use that poem as somewhat of a guided meditation in our work together this morning. T.S. Eliot was, as I understand it, a student of Buddhism. And you can, if you've read any of his poetry, you can see the Dharma sprinkled in the midst of all of it. You can't get away from it. So let's take a look at it. He talks about the turning world. So what is the turning world? Well, the obvious thing is the turning earth. I love the graphic, by the way. Picture, very good. The turning world is the world we live in. It's always turning, isn't it? And if we look at the Buddhist perspective on the turning world is not so much outside of us, or I should say not just outside of us, but that turning world is really inside of us. Because whatever the world is or isn't, we can only experience it within ourselves. We experience the world, we experience what we call reality through seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, sensing, and thinking. So the five senses are like the colors on the palette, and thinking is the brush that sort of paints the pictures. And we can paint whatever pictures we want, you see. The life gives us the colors, but it's up to us what pictures we paint. So that turning world consists of our senses and our thoughts, and it's the world we live in. It's a world that's always turning. Everything we see is changing. Everything we hear is constantly changing. Sensations in our bodies constantly changing. Our thoughts constantly changing. So that's the turning world. And it's saying that the turning world depends upon that which doesn't turn. Depends upon the still point. At the still point of the turning world, there the dance is. And it's neither flesh nor fleshless. Flesh nor fleshless. Fleshless. Say that a few times, Robert. Fleshless. Neither from nor toward. So it's something that we cannot describe with words or think about with concepts. It's beyond the mind. It's beyond visibility as we know it. It's not rest. It's not movement. What is that still point? What is it that is the axis of the world that our whole turning world is spinning on? See, that's really what drives it. That's what's such a beautiful paradox, is that that which is in motion depends upon that which is not in motion. That which is visible depends upon that which is not visible. You know, sounds depend upon silence. We see form only because there's space. So the paradox is that the most important thing in our life experience is not what we see or hear or taste, but it's that center point, still point. You may think of a spinning disc or a merry-go-round, something that's going around maybe very fast. And yet in that disc, in that merry-go-round, there is, at least in theory, one point that's not moving. Right? And that's the one right at the center. The center never moves. Well, if we look at a seesaw, teeter-totter, whichever you call it, you know, kids on the seesaw, or we use it as levers sometimes, which is basically just a big seesaw. But the seesaw is always in motion, but it would not exist if it wasn't for what? A still point that never moves. That which gives power to the teeter-totter, to the lever, excuse me. I'm recovering from a cold and my antihistamines are kicking in. So the lever can be very powerful, and we can move a lever a great distance, but the power of the lever depends upon that which doesn't move. So it's very interesting, very enigmatic, and actually very appropriate to the Dharma teaching. It's neither rest nor movement. So unlike the fulcrum, and unlike the center of the disc, it's called the still point by T.S. Eliot, but it's not still in time and space. It's beyond time and space. Still point, where neither rest nor movement are gathered. Past and future are gathered. Do not call it fixity. See, so it's not moving, it's not still. It's not flesh, it's not fleshless. It's not visible or invisible. It's not form, it's not emptiness. For those of you familiar with the Zen teaching, it sounds very Zen-like. Not this, not that. And yet, except for the point, the still point, there would be no dance. And that's all we know is the dance. Except for that which we cannot see, hear, taste, smell, sense. if it were not for the still point, which cannot be seen, tasted, felt, or sensed, we would have no experience of the world if it wasn't for that which is beyond the world, that which is beyond experience itself. It's beyond experience itself because it's the basis for all experience. So let's take a look at what that is. What is it that everything depends upon? It's neither moving nor still, and yet we can't touch it or taste it, and yet the turning world wouldn't exist without it. It's so close, it's so familiar. We're kind of like the fish in the ocean. We don't see the ocean because it's what we live in. The still point in this context I see as a way of describing awareness. Were it not for awareness, there would be no turning world, because that turning world is a product of our awareness. Yet the awareness itself is not something that is sitting still or moving. It's not visible or invisible. It's something that's always here, like the fulcrum on a lever, it's always present. It's the basis for everything that we experience, and yet it is totally invisible. And most of the time, as human beings, we're not even aware of it. So using this principle of the still point in the turning world, awareness as the essence of what we call reality, what we call ourself. I'd like to go from that rather theoretical and abstract approach to a very practical approach to this whole thing. Because what this meditation can do is it can be a reminder at any point in time in the busyness of our turning world, and it seems like the world is turning faster all the time, and particularly at the holiday period, sometimes that world turns a little crooked, it feels like. It spins in ways that we can't control or predict. So we can easily get lost, not just at the holiday period, of course, but that seems to be the prime time. But we can get lost in the turning world, and we do. We think the world is it. We think our experience is all the only reality there is. And it feels that way. And probably most people on this planet would believe that that's true. All there is this reality as I experience it. Well, that's all there is. All there is the dance. And yet that dance would not be complete without the still point. It'd be like trying to use a lever without a fulcrum. If you've ever done that, you know, if you've got a pipe or something and you want to move something, well, you look around for a fulcrum, a brick or a block or something. Without that, you could try to lift whatever the object is, and it's not going to work. The same stick, but without that still point, it doesn't have any effectiveness. So we can get out of balance. And yet, sometimes we think, well, if I could just find that still point and hold on to it, that's out of balance too, because we can't hold on to it. It's not a place. It's not an experience. We actually can't lose it. It can't be lost because it's always present. Yet we can forget about it. We can have temporary amnesia, if you will. As I heard one speaker describe human beings as angels with amnesia. You know, it's like, it's kind of like there's that part of ourselves that we can't see that is still very, very real. And yet, we can't live in that alone. We live in and on in around the turning world. So let's take a scenario, and you can probably think of something very readily. And if you can't see me after the service, I'll give you some of my issues you can work with. Get back to me. Be nice if we could outsource some of this one, you know. So, we get lost in the turning world. What are some examples of this in your life? I get lost in an argument, a political argument. I get lost in being stuck in traffic. You know, I can get lost in not feeling well. I can get lost in worrying over my bills. I mean, there's any number of things we can get lost in. And it can be a positive thing, too. We can get lost in, hey, aren't those Chiefs great? And they are great. But of course, there's the other side of it, you see. When they're not so great, well, then there's the suffering, you see. The more we're attached to one side, the more we're attached to the other. So the practice is not about trying to just flatline everything, but the practice is recognizing that our experience is grounded in something invisible. So, first step is just recognizing, man, I got triggered. I got lost. I'm really in the midst of it. It's almost like a 12-step program. The first step is recognizing that I need help. So, being aware of being lost. The teacher, spiritual teacher, Gurdjieff, used to say the main reason humans haven't awakened is because they don't realize they're asleep. So we start out by recognizing that we're asleep. And once we recognize that we're asleep, we're starting to wake up, right? You ever had the experience you're lying down and your spouse or somebody says, hey, are you asleep? Now, what would they do if you said yes? Yes, go away, I'm sleeping. Yeah. So the minute we know we're asleep, we're not asleep anymore. So we come back the way we left. So when we get lost, what are we lost in? We think we're lost in a political argument or a football game or what somebody did or didn't do. What we're really lost in is our own narrative based upon our thoughts, feelings, experiences, and so forth. So unpacking it by coming back to, okay, what am I seeing right now? Well, I'm seeing this, that, and the other thing, whatever it is. Maybe it's in the middle of a family situation that's gone not so good. I'm seeing people, I'm hearing people argue with each other or whatever. Okay, what am I hearing? Well, I'm just hearing sounds, voices, maybe music, maybe whatever. How does that feel in the body? What am I sensing? Maybe a tightness in the gut, or maybe a tightness in the chest. So, going through each of the sense gates, and what thoughts am I creating around this? What am I making this particular situation mean? So one by one, looking at each of the sense gates. And then as we do this, being aware that we are aware of each of these. So it's like I'm aware of seeing you, and I'm aware of seeing that I'm seeing you. See, so we bring a self-reflective awareness. When there's not self-reflective awareness, there's a reactive awareness. You know, oh yeah, you know, you did this and you did that, and there's no me in it. There's no internal awareness. So we bring in that internal awareness that I'm aware that I'm aware. And then the next step is to be aware and become that which is aware. So I invite you right now to be aware that you're aware of something, the sound of my voice or sensations in your body. Be aware that you're aware of it, and then be that which is aware. Be the source of that awareness. When you're fully present to that, that's the still point. And that's not necessarily the end of the process, because from there we can step back into the turning world without losing the still point. We bring that balance with us. We come back into the world having a conversation with someone, but I'm aware of my own center. I'm aware of my own awareness. I'm aware that I'm aware. I'm aware of speaking to you or to whomever. So the dance then takes on a different tone. Then I can begin to dance consciously. And a dancer will tell you, and I'm not a dancer, but I have practiced some martial arts, and I know it's similar in that there's this center point, this balance point. You know, it's called the Dantian or the Hara or the Kath. There's many different names they give to it. It's just typically right here. All movement emerges from that center point. When our movement is disconnected from the center point, it's flying off in every direction and out of control. So let's go one step deeper. I invite you to close your eyes, and we'll walk through this again. Let this be your own experience right now. And if there's something in your memory something active for you that you're working with, you can bring it to mind. Or you can just work with the experience that you're having in this moment. Being aware of the turning world. And then one by one, being aware of each of the sense gates. Hearing. Sensing. Thinking. Feel your body, sense your body. Be aware of your thoughts. And whatever else you experience. Hearing, emotions, desires. And in this awareness, whatever the content of that awareness is, I invite you to be aware that you're aware. Not thinking about it, but just notice. Something is aware that I am aware. Being aware of the content. Being aware of the awareness itself. And then, if you can, identify with that which is aware. Identify with the source of the awareness. Please don't try to think about it, but just notice the awareness. And if you can, subtly shift the center of gravity into the center point. Be the source. Be the one that is aware. Be the one who knows. Be the one who knows. Resting in the fulcrum, the center point, the power point. The still point upon which the world turns. And no matter how fast and how crazy the world is turning, the still point is untouched. And then I invite you to slowly move back into the dance. As you rest in the still point, let your attention return to the sense gates, seeing, hearing, sensing, thinking. Coming back into your personal world. But perhaps in a very different way. Perhaps a little more balanced, a little more centered, a little more connected to the source. And I invite you to become aware of hearing. I invite you to very gently open your eyes, become aware of seeing. And as you do that, see if you can maintain the connection to the still point in the midst of the dance. And I found that the more I can do this practice during the day, not always, but generally more quickly does the process work. It's a little easier to return to it. So sense your bodies. See if you can feel that center point even within the body itself. There's a center point for the body, for the mind, for the soul, but it's all part of the still point. All a reflection, I should say, of the still point. And I invite you to just join me in feeling the field that we've created here. Maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not, but there's a place where this still point is not just within us, but it's around us. And it's collective as well as personal. And as we create this in our own lives, we're creating it not only for ourselves personally, but we're establishing that still point in the turning world in an ever broader and more collective way. So that's why I invite you to just be aware of it any time that you are in a place such as this that supports that entrance into the still point. So as we imagine the world spinning around us, here we are. TBC, the center of the world. Thank you for sharing your practice with us.